Talk heavy. Yeah, talk heavy, huh? Talk heavy, Heavy going live from the field with the realness. Heavy on the scene, huh? Talk heavy, teasy. Heavy going live from the field with the realness. Heavy going live from the field with the realness.
What's going on, beautiful people? Kira Savvy here, Savvy Kira on Instagram and Facebook. And this is, you already know, literally Just Talk Radio. To acknowledge with knowledge. Episode 71 for the podcast and episode 6 for the vlog series Talk Heavy TV. On this episode, I thought it was extremely important to be able to connect with ourselves. There has been so much trial and tribulation throughout our lives that we experienced, from COVID to Black Lives Matter movements to social injustices and things that are happening in society all around us, that I feel like it's extremely important to take a moment to be able to connect with yourself, to connect with your higher power, to really reach a place where you know that you can push forward. So in today's episode, it's about connecting to your true self through centering prayer. And my guest, Rich Lewis, is the author of Sitting with God, A Journey to Your True Self Through Centering Prayer. So we're going to discuss what centering prayer is and how you can connect to your higher power in the ultimate form to be able to connect with your true self and sense of being. Rich, thank you for coming and welcome to the show.
Great. No, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So I want to kick this off by asking, why did you write Sitting with God, A Journey to Your True Self Through Centering Prayer?
Sure. I wrote the book. The practice itself has been so healing and transforming to me that I wanted to I didn't want to keep it to myself. I wanted to share it with others. So I wrote the book for really two reasons. One, just to share how you do centering prayer. And then more importantly, I wanted to share how it has healed and transformed me. So that's really why I wrote the book. And it was neat that I had read a book back in 2013 by Amos Smith called Healing the Divide, Recovering Christianity's Mystic Roots. And that's where I discovered centering prayer. And it immediately attracted me. And I thought that's a really interesting practice. Silence has been something that I wanted to be able to do a practice in the silence. I just didn't know what to do in the silence. So I began practicing centering prayer as a result of that book. And I reached out to Amos on his website. We began a back and forth dialogue. We became friends. And to this day, we interact frequently. And Amos is the one that actually nudged me to write a book. So that's essentially why I wrote the book. Amos nudged me, and then I wanted to share how powerful and transforming this practice has been for me, in case it can help others.
That's pretty awesome. And you know what? A question kind of stood out in my mind. Two, actually. One, what exactly is centering prayer? Like, how is it different from any other way we pray? And I noticed in your tagline, you have silence teaches. What does that actually mean?
Sure. Well, silence teaches us who we are. And I guess we'll get into that as we continue to talk. That's the name of my website, because that's what I've discovered is this practice of centering prayer and sitting with God and connecting to my true self, the person God wants me to be. So silence has taught me who I am, the actions I need to take, or sometimes the non-actions I need to take, where I just need to be patient and quiet. So the practice of centering prayer for me has really just taught me the way forward. And I think it can help others do the same thing. It teaches them who they are, connects them to their true self. They learn to let go of who they are not and become who they are. And it's not an endpoint, it's a journey. So silence, really all actions are birthed in silence. So I think of it as I sit with God, and then I get up and walk with God and partner with God on my lifelong true self journey. So that's a little bit about what silence teaches us who we are, and we'll get more into it. So let me describe what centering prayer is. That was also one of your questions. So a very quick history. Centering prayer has been around for about 50 years. It was created in the early 1970s by 3 Trappist monks, so 3 Catholic priests. One of them, Father Thomas Keating, really was noticing there was other forms of meditation happening, transcendental meditation and other forms of meditation happening, and there really wasn't anything for the Christian community. So he sort of challenged his peers that let's find something for the Christian community. And one of the priests, Father William Meninger, was reading an old classic book from the 14th century, and I hope I'm getting the century right, but called The Cloud of Unknowing. And as he read that book, kind of a silent prayer practice kind of jumped out of the pages to him as he was reading the book. So centering prayer, so now let me just describe how you do it. So centering prayer is really considered 2 things: meditation, but also prayer, where it's a relationship with God. We're sitting in quiet, wordless, silent meditation, and we're opening to the presence and actions of God within and connecting to God within us beyond our thoughts and emotions. So how you do the practice is you sit comfortably with your eyes closed, and then to begin the practice, you introduce what we call a sacred word of 1 or 2 syllables. It could be God or a color or Jesus or the ocean or the beach or whatever you want it to be. And that signifies you're beginning your silent sit with God, and you're opening to the presence and actions of God within. And then as you're sitting there, if you begin engaging your thoughts, and what I mean by that is you think about all the things you did before your sit, or you think about, well, now what am I going to do when I get up from my sit? And what errands am I going to do? What responsibilities do I have? You realize you're no longer sitting with God. You're sitting with your thoughts and your planning and your plotting. So interiorly, you reintroduce that sacred word, let go of all your engaged thoughts, come back to the present moment and the purpose of your sit, and then even let go of the sacred word as well. So it's really just a continuous return to God and a continuous sit with God when you engage your thoughts. And then the last thing I'll say is, it's not, the sacred word is not used as a mantra. And there are mantra practices, and those are fine. And some people need a mantra practice where you're repeating a word. In this case, you use it when needed. And the last thing I'll say is it doesn't have to be a word. I started off using a word, but I realized words might be good for auditory people. I'm more of a visual person, so I picture an interior image to come back to the present moment. Some people are more physical people, so they'll use their breath to come back to the present moment. And some people think they might be concerned they'll fall asleep during the practice with their eyes closed, so they keep their eyes open and stare at a spot 5 or 6 feet, perhaps on the floor. So that's a kind of a quick history of the practice. It's 50 years old, and then how you do it.
That's rather interesting. And you know what? It did kind of sound like to me a meditation moment. And those are the moments that I often take, but it's something that I don't do until I feel like I need to. So how often should you say you practice centering prayer?
Sure. So for people new to it and they want to try it, I would encourage them to take baby steps. So it is a discipline. You have to discipline yourself to do the practice. So I would suggest make it the first thing you do as you begin your day. And I try to practice for 20 minutes. Now that may obviously sound very daunting. So you start with 1 to 5 minutes. So make it the first thing you do in the morning and do it for 1 to 5 minutes and try it for 30 days. And see how it goes. And then if you discover that and I think most people will find 5 minutes is really not as bad and painful as they thought it was. You can then increase the time to 10 minutes and 15 minutes. And then what I tell people to do is add a second sit at some point later in the day and take the same baby steps if you need to, 1 to 5 minutes, and slowly work your way up. And then before you know it, you have a twice a day practice. And the reason I encourage people to practice twice is because, the morning one is like a reset button, and it gets you going for the day and grounds you and connects you to God, connects you to life, and prepares you for the day. And then kind of your interior reservoir runs dry, and you find you need that second sit. So the second sit kind of helps you finish the second half of the day. Because some people will say, I don't have time for the second sit, I'm too busy. And I'll challenge them just to try it. It has a way of giving you back time. Because if you think about it, the practice, you let go of thoughts and emotions. You take that let go gesture with you into your everyday life. So for the second half of the day, you learn to better let go of the things that don't require your attention and hone in and focus on the things that do. So I find that my second sit helps me be very productive and helps me finish the day strong. And I need the sit no matter how busy I am. So that's a little bit about, when should you do it, and then, taking baby steps with a practice like this, and disciplining yourself to do it, but then just taking baby steps with it.
Well, my viewers know that, and my listeners know I am all about self-help. And it really does sound like an incredible way to incorporate centering prayer with your self-help and your self-care routine. And this is a practice that anybody can do, no matter your religious preference, no matter your spiritual preference. And it does really sound like a good idea just to have that moment to be able to connect to your true self and your higher power. So where should one actually practice centering prayer?
Sure. And I'm glad you said, anybody can practice centering prayer. It's not, even though earlier I mentioned the history was three Trappist monks, really anybody can practice centering prayer. Come as you are with whatever you believe to this practice, whatever you want to call God, higher power, infinite wisdom, God. Come as you are and do this practice. So where should you practice? It's best to find a place in your home where it's distraction free, as much as distraction free as possible to do your practice. So for me, I do it in a second room in our house for my practice, or I can do it in my basement as well. We have a chair down there as well. So it's best to really find a distraction free environment. And if you're in a noisy environment, though, you could use some white noise in the background. So I realize some people live in the city, and perhaps it's not as easy to get away from noise. So some people will put white noise in the background, or maybe some type of pleasant music in the background that blocks out some of the louder noise as well. But the best thing to do is really to find a distraction-free environment. But then I'll also say you can be creative with your practice. And I'll give maybe a few funny examples. I go to a chiropractor once a month, and the first thing that I do is, in the first room, I lie on this bed, and this roller rolls underneath my back to loosen me up before I go into the next room to see the doctor. And that's for 10 minutes. I do a centering prayer sit while I'm lying on my back in the chiropractor. You can do it for work. In the past, I had to travel on planes and trains. You can practice on a plane. You can practice on a train. You can practice on a bus. Nobody knows what. They just think you're sleeping and you're practicing centering prayer. You can practice on vacation if you're sitting out at a pool so you can practice centering prayer anywhere. But yes, it's best to find a distraction-free environment. But it's sometimes fun to be flexible and do it in other environments when all of a sudden you notice, I have some downtime and I'm in this environment, I could do a quick 5 or 10 minute sit.
I think that is rather funny that you did practice at the chiropractor, and no one knows what's happening or what's going on around you but you. And I feel like that's kind of stealing a moment just for you, just for yourself, just to be connected to yourself. We often have extremely busy lives, and we have a hard time finding that connection to ourselves. And I think that's super awesome that centering prayer does give us that. So my question is, what happens to you, to your mental space, to your body? What happens during centering prayer?
Sure. So we come to centering prayer really with no expectations. We simply come because we trust God, we love God, we want to just trust what will happen. So we come with no agenda. And as I mentioned, we're letting go of our agenda and our planning. But then what you seem to notice outside of the practices are various fruits that God seems to bless us with. And even at a higher level, Thomas Keating, really one of the founders of centering prayer, considered it divine therapy, because if you think about it, our bodies hold. So we kind of have physical release of tension. If you think about it, your body holds a ton of tension in your forehead or your shoulders or your stomach. You hold stress and tension in your bodies. Sometimes we don't even realize it till we begin to focus on it. So a practice such as this, each time you're just sitting in silence and letting go, you're releasing tension that you're holding in your body in various places. And so it's kind of a gradual release of tension in your body. And then it's also kind of a mental release because you're letting go of thoughts, but also you're letting go of repressed thoughts that often you didn't know you had, that go back many, many years, if not all the way back to being a baby. So it's really kind of a release of tension that your body and mind holds, which is really true freedom. We don't deserve to live with all this stress and tension in our bodies and in our minds. So that's one thing that happens that's really powerful over the long haul. And then the other thing that happens is, I think of it as a reverse prayer. God is praying in me what God knows I need. So for me, I've noticed since I've been practicing centering prayer, which goes back to 2014, I'm a different person. I'm a much more confident person in myself. I'm more excited to live life. And I'm not saying I didn't want to live before centering prayer, but I seem to be more excited and more excited to see what the present moment entails. I think I'm less reactive. And what I mean by that is I'm more willing to listen to people and just be present and listen and not be so quick to judge them and critique them as being wrong and my way right. So I'm more open to listen and more open to other people's opinions. Seem to get wisdom for tasks that suddenly pop into my head, nudges to get out of my comfort zone, try and do new things. So these are things, that I've noticed about myself, in addition to just the freeing of the stress and the mental and physical stress that the practice itself can do for you.
And wow, I tell you, talk about timing, because this is something personally that I know that I can use. And I was just saying to myself, how can I increase more of my self-care when I'm dealing with tumultuous situations? Where can I find a moment to really connect to myself or connect to my true self, to connect to my higher power? So who would you say is your true self?
Sure. Your true self is the person God wants you to be. Because what happens during centering prayer is you're letting go of who you are not so you can become who you are. So if you think about it, your mind tells you all kinds of things that are just not true. I'm too old to try this, or I'm too young to try this, or I don't have the right skill set, or I'm crazy to even try to think about maybe leaving my job and trying a new job, or this is crazy. I shouldn't just move and go further west in the US, or if I'm on the western side, move and go east. So you begin to let go of all these thoughts and emotions that are harmful, or your anxiety or worry, and actually live the life you were intended to be. So that, for me, that's what your true self is. You're connecting to the person perhaps you're afraid to be, but the person that you should be, and the daily steps and the daily actions you should take. And then I think I mentioned it earlier, it's really not an end point. It's a continuous journey, which makes it exciting. Your true self journey through life and the different things you should be doing as you age.
Wow. And talking about speaking into existence and speaking some things into someone's life personally for me. So I'm going to go ahead and say thank you. But I also would like to know, what are some resources for people like myself or others that want to further exploring centering prayer?
Sure. I would say come to my site, silenceteaches.com. When you subscribe, I have a short and free ebook on centering prayer if you want to just learn more about what it is and how you do it. And then I have a resource page with a ton of recommended books that I have read or online courses that I have read, and others websites that I find helpful. And then if you find that centering prayer is something that really does intrigue you and attract you, my book is on the website, the About the Book section, and you can check the book out. So the best place really, I guess, would be to come to my website, silenceteaches.com, where I have a ton of resources right there on my site. And then if you're interested in what I do, I have I'm on various social media platforms, so you could click whatever icon platform you're on, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn, because I'll put content out in a lot of the different social media platforms. You can follow me on your favorite platform if you have one, or just stick with my site.
And I'll make sure that you guys get that information, because you already know I'm about giving and giving and giving and making sure that we have what we need to just connect to us and connect to our higher power. Rich, thank you so much for sharing centering prayer with us. You guys make sure you check out his website, silenceteaches.com, and I'll make sure that you also get that information once this video is posted in the description box below. Rich, thank you again for joining us. I really appreciate you being here.
No, thanks for having me on, and hopefully this was very helpful for your community.
I absolutely know it was. All right, folks. Till next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Peace.